Hi, it's Janelle from Smart Edition Academy. In this video, we're going over a GED reading practice test. You can follow along with me as I take this test and explain each question one by one. You can take this GED practice test with me by using the link in the description below. You'll also find a link to our free GED study group and the GED online study course. So, let's get started. Fill in the blank with the correct active or passive verb. I blank to become a police officer. I have always wanted to become a police officer. This sounds good. Let's look at the remaining choices. I am always wanting to become a police officer. This would mean that the desire to become a police officer has stopped and continued over and over. This doesn't seem to be correct. I was always wanted to become a police officer. This is not grammatically correct. Let's look at the last answer. I have always wanting to become a police officer. This is also not correct. It's important to choose the answer that started in the past and is continuing. This would mean the correct answer is the first one. I have always wanted to become a police officer. I wanted to become a police officer, and that want is continuing. Which of the following sentences uses the most formal language? This essay claims that sugar is bad for people. I think that sugar is bad for people. I believe that sugar is bad for people. I say that sugar is bad for people. Formal writing in general tries to be as objective as possible. So you don't want a personal opinion stated in formal writing. So, in this case, the correct answer would be, this essay claims that sugar is bad for people. This is the only answer that is not a personal opinion. Which of the following sentences is passive? Remember that a passive voice has a subject that is acted upon, and an active sentence has a subject that is performing an action. So let's look at all the answer choices. The cashier helped the customer. The subject is the cashier, and what are they doing? They are helping. This sentence is in the active voice. Let's look at the next answer. She filled the container with water. The subject is she. The action is filled. So we have the subject performing the action. This would make this an active sentence as well. Steve answered the phone when it rang. The verb is answered. The subject is Steve. This sentence is also active. The computer was turned on by the technician. In this sentence, was turned is the verb. Subject is computer. But what is doing the turning on? It's the technician, not the computer. Therefore, this sentence is in passive voice. So this is the correct answer. The computer was turned on by the technician. How would you change the following sentence to active voice? The books were returned to the library by the student. First, let's decide if this sentence is in the passive voice. It uses a form of the verb to be, were, and the past participle of the main verb, return, with the ed on it. And the subject is books, but it's receiving the action, being returned, because the student is the one who is actually doing the returning. The books are being returned. So how do we change this sentence to be active? Let's take the actor and move it to the beginning of a sentence. So the student did what? They returned the books to the library. This is the correct answer here. The student returned the books to the library. In which of the following situations would it be best to use informal language? So the correct answer here would be in a situation where you would be with people you know, friends, family. Those situations you would feel more comfortable to be informal and relaxed. So which of the following options here would be a casual environment? The correct answer would be this answer here, brunch. At brunch, you're usually with friends or family or people you know. Which of the following sentences uses the most formal language? So we have congrats, congratulations, congrats, congratulations on your recent success, and congrats to you. Formal language avoids shortened words and abbreviations, and it also avoids very simple or short sentences. So which one of these sentences is the most complex and long? This would be here. Congratulations on your recent success. The rest of them uses contractions and are short. Which of the following sentences uses the most informal language? Where's the best cafe in these parts? Could you direct me to a nice cafe in the area? Would you be able to show me to a nice cafe? Could you tell me where a nice cafe is around here? The first answer here contains a contraction. So where's is supposed to be where is. And usually contractions are signs of informal language. Since this is the only question that has a contraction in it, this would be the correct answer. Notice that the rest of the answers make polite requests, could you and would you, while the first sentence here asks very directly. Read the text below and answer the following question. Carving a pumpkin is a fun activity that can create memories to last a lifetime. You will need a pumpkin, a knife or kid-safe cutting tool, a bowl, a large spoon, a marker, old newspapers or plastic sheeting, optional, your imagination. What to do? Before you start carving a pumpkin, choose your workspace carefully. Spread newspapers or plastic sheeting over the floor if desired. First, hollow the pumpkin out. Do this by using your knife or kid-safe cutting tool to make a circular cut on the pumpkin around the stem. Carefully pull off the outer rind and reach into the pumpkin to scoop out the pulp and seeds. Scrape the bottom and inside edges of the pumpkin with the spoon to remove as much pulp as possible. A jack-o'-lantern with a wet, pulpy interior is difficult to carve and rots quickly once it is on display. Now it is time to create your jack-o'-lantern face. Clean the surface of the pumpkin if necessary and decide which side you'll use for the face. Errors cannot easily be fixed once you start to carve, so for best results, draw the design onto the pumpkin before making any cuts. Then, use your knife or cutting tool to carefully carve your jack-o'-lantern's features. Which step comes just before the creation of the jack-o'-lantern's face? So let's look for the sentence that talks about the jack-o'-lantern's face. This would be here in the third paragraph. Now it is time to create your jack-o'-lantern's face. So let's look just before this sentence. A jack-o'-lantern with a wet, pulpy interior is difficult to carve and rots quickly once it is on display. Scrape the bottom and inside edges of the pumpkin with the spoon to remove as much pulp as possible. This is the step completely before creating the jack-o'-lantern's face. So the correct answer is scooping out the pulp. Why is it best to draw a design onto the pumpkin before cutting? It prevents injury, it prevents errors, it prevents rotting, it prevents messes. It prevents injury. Drawing a design on the pumpkin, does it prevent injury? The action that you take is using a kid-safe cutting tool in order to prevent injury. So this is not the correct answer. It prevents errors. Is this the case? Let's look for the sentence that proves this. In the third paragraph, it says, errors cannot easily be fixed once you start to carve, so for best results, draw the design onto the pumpkin before making any cuts. This is the correct answer, but let's check out the remaining two. It prevents rotting. This is not the correct answer. The jack-o'-lantern rots when the pulpy interior is out on display. It prevents messes? No. The design of the jack-o'-lantern itself is messy, which is why you use old newspaper or plastic sheeting on the floor. Therefore, the correct answer is it prevents errors. Read the draft essay below and answer the following question. Last week I saw a bad television commercial. It said that women need more self-confidence and that breast augmentation surgery can give it to them. I do not think plastic surgery leads to self-confidence. True self-confidence comes from the belief in our accomplishments, not from the belief that we look good. Our society sends the message that women need to look like fashion models, but fashion models' body types aren't normal. Many suffer from anorexia, and some have undergone plastic surgery to conform to a false ideal of beauty. And what is the point of aiming for that unattainable ideal? It takes time and energy that could be focused on more important matters. Women are told they need to look perfect, but nobody actually looks perfect, even in pictures in magazines. Even the pictures in magazines are airbrushed and augmented. They are not real, and the women in these pictures are unusually pretty. Plus, they have professional help to keep their bodies looking as close to our false ideal of beauty as possible. Ordinary women who have to spend time working every day and caring for our families have no chance of attaining anything close to that level of beauty. If you're like me, you may feel a pressure to measure up to a society's false ideal of beauty, but you shouldn't. As women, we need to focus on making the world better, not on making our faces prettier. The word bad in sentence 1 is poor word choice because it is not. Let's look at the sentence. Last week, I saw a bad television commercial. Imagine if you asked someone an opinion on something and they just said that it was bad. Being bad is a pretty broad answer, don't you think? And it can have a few meanings. Was the commercial of poor quality? Or did the author think it was immoral? The word bad in this case is a poor word choice because it's not precise enough. The rest of the answers don't fit. Bad isn't a positive word. And it's not a matter of it being inclusive. And there's nothing wrong with it being simple. It's just that the meaning is a little bit too broad for this case. The correct answer is precise. Which revision of sentence 1 leads the reader more precisely towards the author's main idea? Let's look at the first sentence. Last week, I saw a bad television commercial. Remember that we said that this sentence isn't precise enough. So what is the conclusion of this paragraph? Let's look at the last few sentences. If you're like me, you may feel a pressure to measure up to a society's false ideal of beauty, but you shouldn't. As women, we need to focus on making the world better, not on making our faces prettier. So it seems like the author is saying that commercials like the one that they watched cause a pressure to not feel able to live up to a specific ideal. They're inviting the audience to share in the feeling of anger and frustration about this commercial. Let's pick an answer choice that reflects that. Last week, I saw a television commercial that left me outraged. That sounds good so far. Let's look at the remaining answers. Last week, I saw a television commercial that should be banned. Does the author make any case in this passage for banning commercials? No. Last week, I saw a commercial that was not aiming to sell anything. I don't think that the author had an objection to a commercial that didn't sell anything. Last week, I saw a poorly acted and directed television commercial. This passage is not about a poorly acted television commercial. It's not about the quality of the commercial itself. It's about the message. So the correct answer is the first answer here. The author is inviting the audience to share in the outrage of this commercial. If sentence 4 is the thesis statement, which statement accurately expresses a problem the writer should address in revision? Let's look at the fourth sentence. True self-confidence comes from the belief in our accomplishments, not from the belief that we look good. So remember that a thesis is the main idea of a passage. So how can the writer change this in a revision? The thesis has nothing to do with television. The thesis contains spelling and grammar errors. There's no errors within the sentence, or no grammatical errors or spelling errors in the sentence. The body paragraphs do not clearly defend the thesis. Let's look at the body paragraphs that come after the sentence. The paragraphs talk about women suffering from disorders and getting surgery for a standard that cannot be attained. Therefore, this paragraph here does not support the thesis statement. And finally, the final answer here is the thesis directly contradicts the conclusion paragraph. Does it contradict it? No, this is not the case. The conclusion of this paragraph is elaborating on the fact that we should believe in our accomplishments and not our appearance. The correct answer, then, is the third one. The thesis is not supported by the body paragraphs, and that's something that the writer can change in a revision. Which thesis statement should replace sentence 4 to align more clearly with the points the author makes in the body of the essay? The media's ideal of beauty cannot be achieved. This looks good so far. Let's look at the remaining answer choices. Fashion models are often victims of eating disorders. This is more of a supporting statement. It's too specific to be a thesis. More women need to get involved in business and politics. The author doesn't mention anything specific about business or politics within this paragraph. And finally, television commercials about breast augmentation should be banned. There's nothing that suggests that the author would want to ban these kinds of commercials, even though they feel outraged by these kind of commercials being on television. The correct answer is the first one. The media's ideal of beauty cannot be achieved. Study the outline below and answer the following questions. Introduction. We need more racial and gender diversity in our superheroes. The lack of diversity in comics means kids get the message that only white males can be heroic. Quote from Sid Markle, page 213. When I was a kid, imagining myself saving the world meant imagining I was white. B. Quote from Lydia Green, KentswickTimes.com. I remember people seeing my comments and saying, "You like reading that?" I heard, "You think you can be important?" C. Markle and Green aren't just interacting with superhero comics as fiction, they're seeing them as messages from a real world that excludes them. 3. Conclusion. A. Recap main points. B. Let's create a world where all kids are invited to imagine they can be superheroes. Which statement from the outline will be the main idea of the essay? Generally, when you think of a main idea, it's usually found in the beginning of an essay. And which of the sentences listed here is found at the beginning? It would be this one. We need more racial and gender diversity in our superheroes. In the outline, it's being placed in the introduction. The rest of these answers here are supporting statements. And the last is the conclusion, which invites the audience to do something. What does the writer of this outline still need to do? Collect evidence to back up the main idea? Well, the purpose of the body paragraphs are to support the ideas and the thesis that's mentioned in the introduction. So they do have evidence to back up the idea. That's not the correct answer. Figure out how to end the essay. Well, there is a conclusion where they're going to recap the main points and a call to action at the end. So that's not the case. There is a conclusion. Create an attention-grabbing opening statement. It looks like there's only a thesis statement here, but there isn't an opening statement. So this looks like the correct answer. And finally, decide how to organize the ideas in the essay. That's the purpose of this outline, to organize an idea or the ideas that you want to talk about within your essay. So the correct answer is here. Create an attention-grabbing opening statement. The writer of this outline wants to add this sentence. This world needs all the heroes it can get. Where would it fit best? In the introduction before the thesis statement, in the introduction after the thesis statement, in the body before the topic sentence, in the body after the first quotation. Let's think about what kind of sentence this is. It's a broad statement about heroes in general. This would be a good fit for the beginning of an essay. So immediately we can knock out the two answer choices that talk about the body. So where do you think would be the best place for it to go? Since it's a broad statement, it should go before the thesis statement. Generally, you want to start pretty broad and then narrow into a specific idea. So it would read, this world needs all the superheroes it can get. We need more racial and gender diversity in our heroes. The writer of this outline wants to add a second body paragraph. Which statement could function as a topic sentence that clearly adds new information to support the main idea? Remember that a body paragraph should look to say something new and not just restate an idea that was already stated earlier in the passage or will be mentioned later in a conclusion. So let's look at the answer choices. Girls and women tend to gravitate away from careers our society associates with heroic actions. Green writes, as a kid, I wanted to be a firefighter, but people always laughed at me when I said so. If our fiction presented more women and people of color as superheroes, more kids would likely grow up aspiring to save others. Superhero characters in comics and the movies are almost all white and male, sending fans the message that these traits are necessary for heroism. So looking at all these answer choices, the last one just repeats the same statement that is mentioned earlier. The lack of diversity in comics means kids get the message that only white males can be heroic. Since it's repeating an idea that was already mentioned, this can be knocked out. The first two answers veer off into a topic that isn't related. Green mentioning a firefighter is completely irrelevant to the ideas that are mentioned in this outline. The correct answer is this one here. If our fiction presented more women and people of color as superheroes, more kids would likely grow up aspiring to save others. The information in parentheses under 2A and 2B is most likely. Let's look at what they're talking about. So there's a quote from Sid Markle with the parentheses PG 213. PG stands for page. And here, a quote from Lydia Green has KenswickTimes.com. .com, of course, is a website. So these look like sources for where these quotes came from. So the correct answer would be the third one here. Source information the writer will later use to create citations. Read both of the texts below and answer the following question. Once when a lion was asleep, a little mouse began running up and down upon him. This soon wakened the lion, who placed his huge paw upon him and opened his big jaws to swallow him. "Pardon, O king," cried the little mouse. "Forgive me this time. I shall never forget it. Who knows but what I may be able to do you a turn some of these days." The lion was so tickled at the idea of the mouse being able to help him that he lifted up his paw and let him go. Sometime after, the lion was caught in a trap, and the hunters who desired to carry him alive to the king tied him to a tree while they went in search of a wagon to carry him on. Just then the little mouse happened to pass by, and seeing the sad plight in which the lion was, went up to him and soon gnawed away at the ropes that bound the king of the beasts. "Was I not right?" said the little mouse. "Little friends may prove great friends." 2. Beast left his mark on the fence. It was lime green and slate gray and beautiful. So, of course, my father was outraged. If Beast hadn't had talent, Dad would have left it a while. But, as it was, he got 2 of his parishioners to paint the thing over. Within the hour, the fence was back to being as white as the everlasting soul. My father's anger lasted longer than the tag. The funny thing was, Beast loved my father. I don't know why. Life had knocked that kid down so hard so often, he would have hated everything with the name of God stamped on it. But he loved my preacher father more than anything else in the world. Maybe it was the dark suits and the white collars. Beast liked a pretty picture. So, there was my dad ministering to the people in the worst parts of town, charging straight into the drug dens and whorehouses to save people when they called him. He acted like he had no fear whatsoever. Plenty of the neighbors, the hardest put ones, hated him for that. Lots of times he came close to getting his throat cut. More than once it was Beast who saved him. And every time Beast saved my dad, he left his mark on the fence. Dad couldn't stand it. What type of writing is used in the passages? All these answer choices mention either narrative or expository. Narrative is a word that means story, and expository means it's intending to explain something. So it would be something like a manual or essay. Both of these passages are telling stories. Notice that the second passage here uses the perspective of the first person. And the first text here is from the perspective of third person. Nevertheless, they're both stories. So the correct answer is the first one. They're both narratives. Which term describes the structure of both passages? The first answer choice says sequence. A sequence uses an order of events that follow each other. This looks good, but let's look at the remaining answer choices. What about description? Yes, there are some things described, but you can't say that, in general, both texts are describing something as a whole. Cause and effect? Are they explaining how one event had caused another or affected another? Not particularly. And finally, you have problem and solution. Even though there are issues with the first text, there is a problem with the lion being stuck. And the mouse did save them. You can't say that there is a problem necessarily in the second text that is being solved. So the correct answer is sequence. Which statement accurately describes the genre of the passages? We have a choice between fiction and nonfiction for these answers. Let's look at the first text. You have lions and a lion and a mouse talking. It goes without saying that animals can't talk. So this is a sign that this text is a fictional text. The second text here talks about a person whose father is a priest or a preacher. There's nothing that is spoken about in this text that leads to thinking that it would be impossible to happen in real life. So we don't know if this story is fictional or not. So the first text is definitely fiction, and the second may or may not be. Therefore, the correct answer is the last one. Passage 1 is definitely fiction, and passage 2 could be fiction or nonfiction. Which label accurately describes the genre of passage 1? So is the first passage a myth, fable, legend, or mystery? A myth is usually a traditional story that concerns the early history of people, but it involves supernatural events, supernatural beings like gods. So myth wouldn't be the correct answer. A legend is a type of story that is usually regarded as historical, but it's hard to authenticate whether it's true or not. So you might think of like the legend of King Arthur, for example. This story isn't a legend, just particularly because of the talking animals, of course. And mystery, of course, is about solving something specific, solving a crime, for example, or solving an event. And mystery wouldn't fit for this kind of text. The correct answer would be fable. A fable is usually a short story that involves animals as characters and it has a moral or a good message at the end. So the correct answer would be fable. Which label could not accurately describe the genre of passage 2? So what is this passage not? Remember that a legend is a traditional story that is sometimes regarded as historical, but it can't be authenticated. A legend would have to be from a long time ago, and this passage seems pretty recent. Let's look at the remaining answer choices. A memoir is a biography that's written from personal knowledge. This sounds like it could be a piece a piece of text for memoir. It is written in first person. It's lots of I's and my father. This passage is also very short. It's a short story. And it could be an autobiography, which is an account of a person's life told from their perspective. So this passage is definitely not a legend. Use the map below and answer the following question. A person could get from the lodge to Fairyland Point by, so we have a road and we have a trail. Fairyland Point is all the way up at the top, which would be north. So driving east or west on the road would not get you to Fairyland Point. Walking south would also not get you to Fairyland Point, but walking north on the rim trail would get you to Fairyland Point. That is the correct answer. Which feature on the map is between Sunset Point and Bryce Point? Let's find these 2 points. Here is Bryce Point. Here is Sunset Point. Which feature is in between? The correct answer would be Inspiration Point. How could a person travel from the visitor center to Bryce Point without touching Sunset Point? Here is visitor center. Here is Bryce Point. We don't want to touch Sunset Point. Here is the road. It would seem that you want to keep going south and avoid the trail if you don't want to head to Sunset Point, or if you don't want to touch Sunset Point. Staying on this main road would get you there. So the correct answer is the first one, by keeping to the main road. Which feature on the map is farthest west? West is direction over here, and so the correct answer would be the Visitors Center, D. The legend shows, the legend is this key chart here, and it's labeled road and trail. It shows that the dark line is the road and the dotted line is the trail. So the correct answer would be the first one, how to differentiate between a road and a trail. Adelia stood on the porch in her bathrobe. "Mr. Snuggles?" she called. "Mr. Snuggles, come on in, you little vermin." She peered up and down the street. Sighing, she went back inside, and a moment later emerged with a metal bowl and a spoon. She rapped on the bowl several times. "Mr. Snuggles, breakfast." When Mr. Snuggles did not appear, Adelia reached inside and grabbed some keys off a low table. Cinching her bathrobe tightly around her waist, she climbed into the car. "It's not like I have anything better to do than look for you again," she said. From the text above, you can infer that Adelia is... Okay, let's look at the action of Adelia in this passage. So she's knocking on the bowl, she's going outside, calling for Mr. Snuggles, and calling him a little vermin. That's not very nice to do. I wouldn't call her a kind-hearted person. But she also isn't unconcerned because she is looking around. At least, well, she is attempting to find Mr. Snuggles. It's unlikely that Mr. Snuggles would be her son. It would be strange to call her son Mr. It's likely that she's looking for a pet. The first one. Which detail does not provide evidence to back up the conclusion that Adelia is feeling frustrated? She calls Mr. Snuggles, "You little vermin." That's something you would do when you're angry or upset or disgusted with something. So that is a sign of frustration. She has not yet gotten dressed for the day. This looks correct. Let's look at the remaining answer choices. She complains about having to search for Mr. Snuggles. That's definitely a sign of frustration. And finally, she sighs when Mr. Snuggles does not immediately appear. Again, another sign of being frustrated, not being able to find this pet. So the correct answer is this one here. She has not yet gotten dressed for the day. That's not a sign that she's frustrated. Which detail from the text supports the inference that Adelia cares what happens to Mr. Snuggles, even if she is angry at him? So the answer choices are: she goes out to look for him, she keeps her car keys near the door, she is joking when she calls him vermin, she says she wants to be doing something else. Going out to look for him, in spite of being frustrated, does sound like something she's doing, but let's look at the remaining answer choices. She keeps her car keys near the door. That has nothing to do with whether she is angry or not. It just seems like a convenient place to keep your keys. She is joking when she calls him vermin. We don't know the tone of which she's saying that. It does sound like something you would do when you're frustrated. There's nothing that suggests that she said it in a joking manner. She says she wants to be doing something else. That doesn't show that she cares about what happens to the animal. The correct answer is the first one. She goes out to look for him. Which sentence of dialogue, if added to the passage, would support the conclusion that Mr. Snuggles actually belongs to someone else? Whatever possessed me to adopt a cat? You shed on my sheets, you pee on my couch, and now this. Next time Rawl goes out of town, I'm going to babysit his plants instead. If you make me late again, I'm going to lose my job. Then how will we eat? So the first one straight out suggests that the cat is adopted by Adelia. So that's not the correct answer. Being frustrated about an animal peeing on the couch does not prove that the animal would belong to someone else. Next time Raul goes out of town, I'm going to babysit his plants instead. So this sentence implies that the cat would have belonged to Raul. So this looks to be correct. Let's look at the final answer just to be sure. If you make me late again, I'm going to lose my job. Then how will we eat? Again, this is another sentence of dialogue that doesn't prove that the cat actually belongs to someone else. It sounds more like the cat belongs to her. So the correct answer is this one here. Read the text below and answer the following question. As Time Goes On is a painfully realistic depiction of what life is like for some senior citizens in the twilight of their lives. Tabitha Reynolds artfully captures the harsh reality people face when they grow old. From one's physical limitation to the emotional toll of letting go of one's former self, Reynolds pays homage to this fragile yet meaningful time in a person's life. The book chronicles the final years of Audrey Lacoste's life. A former prima ballerina, Audrey is now a prisoner to her rheumatoid arthritis. The disease has limited Audrey's body in ways she could never have imagined. Her physical ailment, coupled with the loss of her beloved husband, causes her two self-involved children to move her into Sunshine Cove, an assisted living facility. The facility is anything but sunny, but slowly the light in Audrey's life begins to flicker once again when she makes an unexpected friend. A New York Times bestseller for 7 consecutive weeks, As Time Goes On is a must-read. The words will make you laugh, cry, gasp, and sigh as you travel along the rocky road to the end of Audrey's life. The purpose of this passage is to decide, inform, persuade, or entertain. Text here seems to be describing a really good book that the author believes is worthwhile for an audience to read. Therefore, the correct answer would be to persuade. Even the end talks about how the words in the book will make you laugh and cry. And it says that it's a must read. That particularly jumps out as something that's encouraging an audience to look at the book. Which detail from the passage is factual? As Time Goes On is a painfully realistic depiction of what life is like for some senior citizens. Tabitha Reynolds artfully captures the harsh reality people face as they grow old. The book chronicles the final years of Audrey Lacoste's life. As Time Goes On is a must-read. So looking at the first answer, is As Time Goes On necessarily a situation that happens for a lot of seniors? We don't know. Some may not. So it's not necessarily factual. Again, the answer choice, Tabitha Reynolds artfully captures the harsh reality people face as they grow old, is again not necessarily the case. It could be and it couldn't be. The book chronicles the final years of Audrey Lacoste's life. This seems to be the correct answer. And finally, As Time Goes On is a must read. This is a strong encouragement, but it's not a fact. It's a suggestion that the author is making towards the audience. So the correct answer is this one here. The author of the passage includes details about Audrey Lacoste's life in order to appeal to the reader's reason, trust, feelings, or knowledge. There's nothing that's listed here that necessarily is providing a lot of facts. So reason necessarily isn't the case. There's nothing that involves a lot of logic or debate or knowledge necessarily. The closest thing is the rheumatoid arthritis, but it doesn't provide any specifics about the disease necessarily. The thing that most sticks out would be the words will make you laugh, cry, gasp, and sigh. it seems like the author wants to show that this book causes a lot of feelings. It stirs up a lot of feelings. So the correct answer would be feelings here. Read the passage below and answer the following question. The idea of getting rid of homework at the elementary school level is debatable, but giving young children a well-needed break after school is undoubtedly beneficial. A study of elementary-age children and homework showed that daily homework causes high rates of anxiety and depression in young people. In contrast, schools that have gotten rid of homework requirements have reported a drop in depression and anxiety among students. According to a nationwide analysis of standardized testing scores, schools that have gotten rid of homework have seen benefits. Test scores have gone up incrementally from year to year. On the contrary, schools that mandate daily homework have seen stagnant test scores. Therefore, it is safe to say that homework does nothing to enhance student learning at all. Which statement expresses an opinion? The idea of getting rid of homework at the elementary school level is debatable, but giving young children a well-needed break after school is undoubtedly beneficial. The word undoubtedly makes you believe that it's an opinion. Undoubtedly beneficial does make me think that this is an opinionated statement, but let's look at the remaining choices. A study of elementary-age children and homework showed that daily homework causes high rates of anxiety and depression in young people. This is directly referring to a specific study, so it's unlikely that it's just someone's thought. It's referring to something directly. So it sounds like this is a fact. In contrast, schools that have gotten rid of the homework requirement have reported a drop in depression and anxiety among students. Again, this is a report, have reported. So this statement here is a reference to a report. So this is a factual statement. And finally, according to a nationwide analysis of standardized test scores, schools that have gotten rid of homework have seen benefits. Again, this is a nationwide analysis. This is a reference to something documented, so this is a fact. So the correct answer would be the first one here. Let's look at this question. Consider the following sentence from the passage. On the contrary, schools that mandate daily homework have seen stagnant test scores. Is this statement a fact or an opinion? Why? An opinion because it focuses on the beliefs of the school involved. There's nothing in this sentence that leads us to believe that it's referencing an opinion about the stagnant scores. An opinion because it expresses how the author feels about standardized test scores. Again, this is not referring to any author's beliefs. So this sentence is not an opinion. It is a fact because it shares test score results, which is something that can be verified. Schools that mandate daily homework have seen stagnant test scores. So it's referencing something that is documented that shows that schools that do have the daily homework requirement have seen scores that have gone down or stayed the same. So this is the correct answer. A fact because it relies on the school's projected test scores. There's nothing that's referring to test scores that will be happening, which is what projected would mean. So the correct answer is this third one here, a fact because it shares test score results, which is something that can be verified. Which sentence in the passage displays faulty reasoning? According to a nationwide analysis of standardized test scores, schools that have gotten rid of homework have seen benefits. Test scores have gone up incrementally from year to year. On the contrary, schools that mandate daily homework have seen stagnant test scores. Therefore, it is safe to say that homework does nothing to enhance school student learning at all. So the purpose of this passage is to talk about the frequency of the homework, not homework in general at all. So to come up with the conclusion that homework does nothing is a jump that is not supported by the facts or the facts that are listed in this passage. Again, it's talking about if you do homework every day, the level of quality of testing has stagnated. So this is the correct answer here. Read the passage below and answer the following question. Most people have had the pleasure of tasting a delicious chocolate chip cookie at some point in their lives. But what most folks do not know is that chocolate chip cookies were invented by accident. Ruth Graves Wakefield, owner of the popular Toll House Inn in Whitman, Massachusetts, prepared all the food for her guests. People came from all over the world at the Toll House Inn and eat her famous chocolate butter drop dew cookies. These chocolate cookies were such a hit that Ruth found herself baking them on a daily basis. One day, when she was preparing the recipe, she realized she had run out of baker's chocolate. She decided to break up a block of Nestle semi-sweet chocolate instead, expecting them to melt and disperse throughout the cookie dough. To her surprise, when she took the cookies out the oven, the chocolate morsels retained their shape as chips in the cookie, thereby making them the first batch of chocolate chip cookies ever baked. Ruth's chocolate chip cookies were so popular that they ended up permanently replacing her chocolate butter drop dew cookies. Thanks to this happy accident, people all over the world get to enjoy one of the best desserts ever invented. Which sentence is the topic sentence? This will be the main point of the passage. Most people have had the pleasure of tasting a delicious chocolate chip cookie at some point in their lives. This is a very broad sentence about cookies in general. This doesn't look like the correct answer. But what most folks do not know is that chocolate chip cookies were invented by accident. This looks good, but let's look at the remaining answer choices. She decided to break up a block of Nestle's semi-sweet chocolate instead, expecting them to melt and disperse throughout the cookie dough. This is a specific story detail. This doesn't sound like a topic sentence. This supports an idea. Ruth's chocolate chip cookies were so popular that they ended up permanently replacing her chocolate butter drop dew cookies. This is not the correct answer. This is a result of the accident of creating the chocolate chip cookies. The point of this passage is that the chocolate chip cookies were created by accident. This is the correct answer here. Which of the following sentences from the paragraph is a supporting detail of the topic sentence? Again, remember that the topic sentence is that the cookies were created by accident. Ruth Graves Wakefield, owner of the popular Toll House Inn in Whitman, Massachusetts, prepared all the food for her guests on a daily basis. This is not a supporting statement. It gives a little bit of a background on Wakefield, but it's not a supporting detail on the incident of creating the cookie. People came from all over to stay at the Toll House Inn and eat her famous cookie, butter drop dew cookies. This is a statement that supports her popularity of her other cookies, but not the chocolate chip ones, so this is not correct. These chocolate chip cookies were such a hit that Ruth found herself baking them on a daily basis. Again, we want a sentence that supports the fact that these were an accident. This is a result of the popularity of the cookie, but not a supporting statement that shows that this was an accident. And finally, she decided to break up a block of Nestle semi-sweet chocolate, instead expecting them to melt and disperse throughout the cookie dough. This is a supporting statement about the accidental creation of the cookie, so this is the correct answer. And we're finished. Don't forget, you can take a GED practice test that covers all the subjects using the link in the description. You will also find a link to our GED study group where you can connect with people studying for the GED. Lastly, you will find a link to our GED online study course that has everything you need to study for the GED. Good luck!